Get the home field advantage every time with Fairfield by Marriott, official hotel partner of the NCAA. Whether you're a student athlete working toward your championship dreams or your team's biggest fan, Fairfield by Marriott has everything you need to get ready for game day. From comfortable guest rooms to complimentary hot breakfast, Fairfield is part of the Marriott Bonvoy portfolio of hotels and official hotel partner of the NCAA. Visit fairfield.marriott.com to book your next game day stay.
Welcome into The Verge, a show which covers the Baltimore Orioles minor leagues. The Verge is part of BSL Radio. Baltimore Sports and Life is dedicated to analysis and discussion on the Orioles, Baltimore Ravens, and the University of Maryland. The site has a team of writers providing coverage of those teams and houses live streaming content weekly. Join the conversations at the message board, like BSL on Facebook, and follow BSL on Twitter.
Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts and Q&A lets us be more creative on another level. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phil and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to welcome Dr. Stephen Loftus back to the show to help us preview the high school and college baseball seasons. We'll do that, of course, with a focus on the 2022 draft and have some very early, very preliminary discussion on this year's draft class. And after that, we'll get into a little bit about the prospect of a draft lottery in Major League Baseball, perhaps being part of the next collective bargaining agreement. Before we get into tonight's episode, though, we want to start out by shouting out some of our new patrons who have joined our Patreon community, and I'll turn that over to Bob.
Yeah, new member this week, Scott McKnight, signed up middle of last week. We haven't recorded a podcast in a while since at least the Fangraphs reaction that we did on Patreon and then later released to the public. Scott McKnight, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for joining our community, Scott. And now I'll introduce tonight's guest. He is a resident draft expert at Baltimore Sports and Life. In addition to reading his work at BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com, you can also hear him as a co-host on the Warehouse on a co-host on the Warehouse on BSL Radio, along with Matt Corey and Chris Stoner. He is Stephen Loftus. Stephen, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well this evening. It's with the CBA and all that. It's gonna be nice to actually discuss baseball that's gonna be played this weekend. So, gonna be a lot of fun there.
Yeah, it's nice to not have to throw 7 hypotheticals into a statement about baseball that is going to be played. I'll just start with this. We're obviously really far out, probably 5 months or so away from the draft, but what are your early thoughts on this year's class?
Last year, it seemed like by the time the draft actually came together, there was this elite core, a couple of prospects, the Vanderbilt arms, even if Rocker fell, all that sort of thing. This year, there doesn't seem to be that necessarily standout player. Every single player comes with questions. And I mean, that seems to be the case every year, but this year particularly so. I mean, we're going to talk about Termarr Johnson. You're going to talk about Drew Jones. And Drew Jones, he needs to add a little bit of weight to his body, ideally to tap into his power. He needs to connect to his leg. We'll get more to that. But he comes with definite questions, even though the upside there of a possible double plus center fielder with plus speed and 20 home run power. I mean, maybe not his dad's power, but I mean, that type of prospect is really intriguing, even if there's questions if he's going to get there.
Usually draft boards lean college heavy early on for obvious reasons, but then the high school guys, their seasons start and they start to make their presence known later in this cycle. But this year, 2 of your top 3 on your article that you just have up on BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com are high school players. 3 out of the top 5 on Baseball America's rankings are high school players as well. Is this just a weak year for top-end college talent, or is this a really strong crop of high school kids that we're looking at?
Little column A, little column B. I mean, Termarr Johnson has possibly a special bat. Like, it's rare see that sort of bat control, that sort of ability, that sort of hit tool out of a high school player, but he's got that sort of, potentially, I mean, some people see a double plus hit tool. I tend to see it closer in the 60, 65 range just because I like to hedge that bet on a high schooler. And again, Drew Jones, even if he doesn't have necessarily the hitting ability that Termarr Johnson has, he's the type of guy that can honestly make a difference as a center fielder, the type of guy that can go out and add a whole win just based on his defense alone. And I don't think it's necessarily a down year for college, but the challenge is it's everything's still affected by COVID. And so these guys maybe have a year or two. I say they don't have 2 full years of data on them yet. Normally at this point, if we're looking at juniors, you got guys, you've seen them for a couple years, a couple full years on the Cape or in the Northwoods League, and you have a decent idea what the player is going into that year. There's still a lot of questions on those types of guys. And even more importantly for the college class, a couple of the top talent guys in Brooks Lee and Chase DeLauder, they're small conference guys, and small conference guys, whether it's warranted or not, are always going to have that question of the quality of competition and all that. Now, Lee and DeLauder have backed it up, but just again, there's so many questions about the track record and the small conferences that it kind of weighs down that college class a little bit. Now, if they continue putting up numbers, especially in the, shall we say, non-public numbers, if Brooks Lee puts up impressive exit velocities, DeLauder exit velocities, that sort of stuff, then it's going to be hard to argue against them, especially for teams that don't like to bet on the upside, shall we say, of high school players, don't like to take that risk reward. They see too much risk in high schoolers. I mean, Brooks Lee, Jace Young, and Chase DeLauder are going to be really attractive options. And I mean, let's face it, given the Orioles' history, those are the 3 guys that you're going to be looking at, really.
Just how big of a difference maker will Shed Long be for the Orioles? No. Talking about another potential second baseman. If Termarr Johnson really has 70 hit, 70 power, or 80 hit, 60 power, as we've heard in some places potentially, how could you possibly pass on him at 1-1, even if he has to move to second base? He's projected as a plus glove there. So what are your thoughts on the overwhelming love we have for Termarr Johnson on here?
The overwhelming possibility, and it definitely is there. I mean, 80 hit feels a little strong. Now, as I said, I'm a little bit lower in the hit tool just because it's so unprecedented for a high schooler to have that type of control. But still, even if he's a 70 hit, 60, 65 power guy, that's the type of thing you don't turn down. So my notes on it, I was taking a look at video on him this morning just in prep for all this. And the swing is so pretty. Like, if you look at the video of him, the swing out of that left side just looks so gorgeous. And there's not much you can really nitpick about the swing. The only questions are, of course, moving down the defensive ladder, which to me isn't as big of a deal. It's a little knock, but when you're getting at the 1-1 level, it might be enough to move you down. The only question is there's not a ton of physical projection left for him. Like, you look at him and it seems like a fully mature body, and good, which has advantages. Like, you get to see where the guy is going to seemingly be. A lot of power in the legs, and I mean, that's where his power is coming from. I mean, he's 5'8". You don't expect that type of power out of a 5'8" guy. So, again, the strength in the legs is where he's really getting it. So, as I said, the lack of physical projection can be a bit of a worry. He does have short levers, just because of, again, 5'8", short levers on the swing, which, it allows him to get to the inside ball a little bit. But if they're going to pitch him away, it's going to be a little bit harder to work with. And again, quality pitching at the pro level, especially the further you go up, they're going to exploit every weakness you have. So those are the only real questions. And again, they're nitpicky sort of questions. And again, at 1-1, it's just such a hard thing to do, especially with high schools where you're talking projection. And in terms of where they could wind out in terms of physical projection and all the like, Drew Jones has a little bit more to go. He's already, hitting the ball. Like, he doesn't have the sweetest swing. He doesn't have Termarr Johnson's swing, but there is a little bit more physical projection. I mean, he's 6'4", 180, and already has lots of solid power in the bat, with more possibly to come. So again, it's that balance of the here and now safety that kind of Termarr Johnson provides, and the possible upside that Drew Jones has along with, again, just the incredible defensive ability, plus a 70 grade arm in center field is something else. So, well, no offense to Cedric Mullins, but he doesn't have a 70 grade arm out there.
Looking at another center fielder, Elijah Green, it seems like there are definite holes in his swing, questions about whether he's going to have big swing and miss tendencies. But does his electric bat give him a chance to be a contender for the first pick this year?
He would have to show some stuff this spring. He is, in a sense, what Drew Jones could be physically, in 2 or 3 years. He is what you would love to see Drew Jones physically mature into. And he has that power that, every year there's that high school bat that has the swing and miss concerns, but has just absolute light tower warehouse power. Last year, we're talking Brady House. This year, it's Elijah Green. So he's going to have to show some stuff this spring, especially any of the sort of travel opportunities that his team might have. A lot of the worry was on the showcase circuit. There was a little bit of struggle with velocity. And again, who knows how the game's going to be by the time he gets to the majors in, 3 or 4 years. Maybe the game has changed, but, so much of the game these days is that high velocity up in the zone sort of stuff. And if you can't handle it in high school, you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments in pro ball. But again, if he shows the ability, if he shows the ability to catch up to those pitches, when he makes contact, it is a special sound. It is a sound that you don't hear every year. And that power that he has in that bat, assuming he can make enough contact, yeah, he could absolutely be in the 1-1 category, but he's got to show something. He's got a little bit more work to do than, shall we say, Termar or Drew Jones in that way.
So speaking of Jones, you've touched on him a little bit already, but I feel like a lot of the added attention is on Termar Johnson because of that hit tool, and Elijah Green because he's been a 1-1 favorite for so long now. But can you go a little deeper into Drew Jones's just overall game and why he's right up there as a potential pick for the Orioles? You mentioned in your article that between Termar and Jones, this is going to be a debate all year. Right now, you're leaning a little bit towards Jones. I love the bloodlines. Andrew Jones, one of my all-time favorite players, so that kind of skews my viewpoint a little bit here. But what makes him such a special talent and worth a look at 1-1?
Yeah, I'm with you on his dad. I saw Andrew Jones when he was in Richmond, right after his minor league player of the year, and then followed up with a second minor league player. I was very fortunate to see him early in my baseball watching career. I guess I was like 7 or 8 at that point when he was in Richmond. But no, Drew Jones brings his dad's defense in center field. Again, we're talking the type of guy that could be one of the best center fielders in the game, if not the best in the game. And, the Orioles have a guy like that right now in Cedric Mullins, but then combine that with the arm, with a 70 sort of grade arm, the type of arm that you see, maybe Ichiro is historically great arm. Roberto Clemente is historically great arm. Maybe it's not that impressive, but it's just one tick down from it and much better than many of the arms that we see in center field this day. So you combine that with, run times that are towards the plus or even, ticking into the plus sort of category. And the fact that he can generate so much pop already with, again, a 6'4", 180 frame. Elijah Green, special power is 6'3", 215, 220. Jones can add 30 pounds of muscle and all of a sudden tick into possibly that 60, 65 power at the probably, third most important position on the diamond. Give catchers their due, although, who knows what value is going to be going of catchers if they go to the automated strike zone. But still, we'll say the third most important position on the field, bringing power, bringing defense, and bringing speed. The only question, again, he doesn't have the smoothest swing, but he has always made contact. Right now, the other question mark is, if you look at his swing, he seems to kind of step towards third base a little bit. His head, his upper body and legs are a little disconnected from each other. If he can really tap into that sort of connectedness, like Baseball America, they were looking at the things that the first rounders ultimately have to do leading into the draft to really improve their station or maintain, in Jones's case. And the two things they commented on, adding strength and staying synced up with the upper and lower halves. If Jones does that, again, he and Termar Johnson are going to be battling it out, but the potential that Jones brings with that elite center field glove, with that power and with the speed that he absolutely has, that's why it's just a tick above. I'm willing to take a little bit more risk, I will admit, with high school position players. And if I'm going to bet on the two, I will usually try to bet a little bit more on that upside. And just to throw one more thing on Drew Jones in there, there's some reports that he has the ability to play shortstop. So there's some reports that he might be tried out at shortstop. I wouldn't do it. Again, potential to be one of the best center fielders in baseball, but it's still an interesting little aspect that gets added. Maybe we're looking at a Trey Turner-ish sort of situation there.
So question here from a listener, Vivek. Is Drew Jones the best of the potential 5-tool players in the entire draft?
I would say so. I don't think he's the only one who has 5-tool potential. I mean, his weakest tool out of the 5 is probably the hit tool, which is always the scariest. That said, I think he has the highest chance to be a true 5-tool player. Termarr Johnson isn't going to be able to really get that speed sort of thing, which, as the 5 tools go, I tend to put at the lowest. Brooks Lee needs to tap into a bit more power. Jace Young isn't going to be the defense. He'll be decent enough defensively, but he's not a defender. And Elijah Green has, I think, more hit tool questions than Drew Jones. But I would put Drew Jones as the highest probability to become a true, complete 5-tool player out of them. Maybe not the loudest tools. I don't think Drew Jones is ever going to access Elijah Green's power. Few players do. But I think he has the highest chance to truly be called a 5-tool player.
I think you touched on this earlier, but if let's say you're zeroing on Termarr Johnson and Drew Jones a couple weeks ahead of the draft, does the fact that Johnson probably does likely project as a second baseman, and let's say Drew Jones does project more as that center fielder, is that enough to knock Johnson below Jones and enough for you to say, yeah, it's definite Jones here with that pick? Or is it just something maybe to think about a little bit extra?
At that point, I think it would come down to who takes less money. Really, at that point, I would put them as so close, so even. So in my draft model, I have Termarr Johnson about 7 runs ahead of Jones. But the one thing that my model does not account for in any way, shape, or form is defense. And Termarr Johnson has the ability to, play decent defense at second base and even possibly get to, looking at his motions, I would, peg it at like a 57.5 sort of grade, maybe a 60, as he, if he gets some good work with a infield coordinator, that type of guy. Drew Jones could add, again, a win or maybe even more with his defense potentially every single year. So that's why I pretty much have them on level. So really at that point, when it's just so close, when it's that 1A, 1B, at that point, you start maximizing around the remainder of the draft and seeing, okay, who can you cut more of a deal with? And, at that point, start looking to the 30s.
Yeah, for sure. And as early as the day after the last draft ended, it seemed like Jace Young and Brooks Lee were like, okay, here's where the Orioles will be looking. College, polished hitters with up the middle, position. But they both seem likely to be second, third base types with plus hit tool, a little bit of power, not too much. I mean, Lee doesn't have Young's plate discipline, but he doesn't strike out that much either. Who do you prefer between the two?
I probably have a preference for Young. They both have excellent hit tools. They both have a solid sort of, feel to hit. The model hates Brooks Lee. I mean, just honestly, how should we say? He doesn't take nearly enough walks. Now granted, the Orioles don't seem to particularly care about that particular collegiate statistic, or strikeouts for that matter. They seem to focus much more on that power and hit tool combo, separate of walk strikeout, separate of that kind of plate discipline question. It's so tough really to pick between the two of them, but I think I have a preference for Young because just frankly, he has shown some ability to take walks. I think he has a bit more power that he is going to be able to access both in game and both raw. And Brooks Lee is a shortstop, but I think really a shortstop in name only, which means he could play second or third. Neither of them are defensively standout enough to really make a difference there. So I think the slight edge in Young's power and the track record, not only of taking walks a little bit more, but also performing. I mean, this has to be part of it in a major conference, is going to come to play there. That said, I mean, there are a few other college bats that, kind of fit that Orioles profile of performer in a major conference. Jacob Berry, formerly at Arizona, now at LSU. The SEC is the most powerful conference probably in the, or at least consistently in the country. You face the most high quality pro pitching essentially that you can get at the college level there, at least consistently. Now, granted, he's pretty much confined to a corner and more likely first base, but still, it's the type of thing that if he can show up and perform there, he could turn a few heads possibly. But still, of the college bats, I would still lean Young over Lee, and then a small gap to Barry and to Lauder.
So Ben McDonald this morning responded to our tweet about watching college baseball and said his pick is I'll give you one guess who it's going to be. It's Jacob Berry.
Oh, I mean, hey, got to back the alma mater.
This feels like it's a weird year for pitching in the draft because the college pitchers that are towards the top of the class have injury concerns. But then you do have the high school prep arms like Dylan Lesko, who are drawing a lot of attention coming into the spring. Now, obviously, there's sort of this notion surrounding Michael Eisen and the Orioles that they don't like pitchers for at least the first 5 or 6 rounds. But is there any possibility you think that Lesko works his way into that 1-1 conversation?
I doubt it. And I think this would be the case for pretty much any team, even separate the Orioles. There is just historically so many questions about high school pitchers that taking one at 1-1, assuming they don't cut some sort of a deal or something like that, just feels like such a risky proposition unless they're just an overwhelmingly dominant arm. And Lesko is good. He's a bit on the older side, which, you can argue how much age should really come into play. I mean, 18-9 doesn't seem like old, but it's old for a high school player. And I mean, Lesko has the stuff. I mean, fastball in the upper 90s, nice changeup, but just the risk that comes with high school players. I mean, I'm fine with high school pitchers, but definitely not in the top 10. It rubs me the wrong way and just gives me an itchy feeling that I don't like.
So look at the Orioles pick and kind of the system as a whole. We know the Orioles love their college hitters with the hope of this year being the last that the Orioles have that 1-1 pick, or at least this pick at the very top of the draft. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll talk more about the draft lottery and stuff later on, but do you think that this is the year that the Orioles maybe decide to, and I know you have money concerns and a lot of other issues here, and it's only February, but do you think this is a good opportunity for the Orioles to go ahead and try to hit that home run with one of these high school picks this time? And I know John Mioli actually had a pretty good piece, talked about it a little bit this morning, talking about Kobe Mayo as well, referencing the fact that, this farm system is a little deeper now this year. So maybe this could be the year where you swing for the fences a little more. What are your thoughts about that whole strategy this year?
Yeah, no, it's a great question on that end of things, just because, as you said, there is more depth. You don't have to worry quite as much about building the, broad base. And as great as a broad base is, the broader base of, high floor sort of guys in a sense, and not all of them are high floor. There are some with a wider range of possible outcomes, but the challenge with okay, let's be honest here. You look at the system, and beyond the top 4 guys, everyone comes with questions, especially the arms. And you're essentially taking the not fully lottery ticket approach, maybe the slightly higher probability lottery ticket approaches, because, I mean, coming in, there was nothing here. There was nothing in that system, and you needed some guys to come through there for the team to even have any shot. But now we're at least getting some guys in the system that actually do have that chance to succeed. And so, yeah, maybe this is that time for the high school. And high schoolers are always so weird. So one of my favorite experiences with the Rays sitting in the draft room. So, 2017, number 4 comes up. We draft Brendan McKay. Now, we took a look back and, we had Brendan McKay at the top of our draft. as one of the best hitters and one of the best pitchers. Like, he was tearing it up that year. Absolutely. And he looked great. Now, we went back and looked at his high school reports, and it was funny to see, just kind of like, he's a middling sort of, maybe 5th, 6th round sort of high schooler at that point. And all of a sudden he's at the top of our boards. And one of the things that we jokingly said was, this is what high schoolers become. We wanted to call the area scout and be like, this is what they become. And you look at a player who started at that and became this. So again, you look at then these high schoolers at the top of the draft, the Termar Johnsons, who are starting from already such a higher place than a Brendan McKay coming out of high school. And now, granted, he dominated Western Pennsylvania. One of my cousin's husbands is a high school coach there. He was very glad to see Brendan McKay graduate high school. He was very glad to see him gone. But he wasn't that first round type of talent then. And you look at Drew Jones and Termar Johnson, they are truly first round and top of the first round type of guys. And you dream about what they could become, the perennial all-star that you don't have to wonder about. And maybe this is that year. And I honestly hope that it is this year. Like, as much as I recognize the college guys are that safer sort of pick because of the data that exists on them, I really hope that they feel comfortable enough that if they see something they like out of one of those two high schoolers, that they're willing to take that shot without the worry that, well, we're just going to, it might not work out, but they won't feel like there's the cupboard's so bare that they can't waste a pick, in a sense.
Stephen, that kind of goes back to a point we hear a lot from the national, baseball media talking about the Orioles, which is that Mike Elias has gone after this wide base. Try to get a wide base of talent. So you do things like trade Dylan Bundy for 4 pitchers with the hopes that 1 or 2 stick out. Do you think that now that they have sort of built the depth of the system up a little bit, that it's time to flip the switch on that, maybe as a whole in acquisition and not just a draft?
I think so. I think we start seeing that switch about a year from now. I think this is the last year of the acquisition mode, essentially. And then starting, maybe with the winter meetings this year, maybe with things next year. At this point, you stop the acquisition, you start the filtering. You filter out the guys that you honestly think can make a contribution to the next Orioles playoff team, and the guys that maybe they can't be a full contributor, but they can be a useful piece for someone else. That's when you start packaging them for, it doesn't have to be the star player. I mean, the Astros went out and, there's always going to be the Orioles Astros comparisons, as to a certain extent tired of them I'm hearing at this point, but there's always going to be those comparisons. The Astros went out and got, your Evan Gattis type of guy, not a world beater, not a guy that's going to ultimately make the difference, but a step up from, a actual major leaguer, which again, they didn't necessarily give up any world beaters of prospects for him or anything like that. They gave up the guys that they didn't think could ultimately be on that playoff team, but could be useful to someone else. And so hopefully this year is about identifying essentially that filter, and then start sending out the guys and bringing in the, again, doesn't have to be the Francisco Lindor trade or the, Nolan Arenado trade or something like that. It can be something smaller, but hopefully it's a move towards that.
Yeah, good point. And just speaking to the unpredictability of pitchers in general, a guy who seemed like a slam dunk top 3 pick last year gets picked by the Mets, 11, and doesn't sign. Can Kumar Rocker carve out enough interest without playing organized baseball this year to do better than he would have last year?
Oh, I mean, he'll probably go to the independent leagues or do something along those lines. I mean, there is historical precedent for this. Aaron Crow had basically the same situation happen in 2008, I think. I can't remember if it was 2008 or 2009. I think he was drafted in 2009. And he went, when did he win? He went as a top 10 pick both times. Let's see, drafted 9th overall in 2008, 12th overall in 2009. So that's a pretty good Rocker sort of comparison, a high talent, highly rated sort of guy that drafted as a junior, didn't sign, went out into indie ball and came back again. So yeah, Kumar Rocker absolutely could generate that interest. But the big question that no one knows is, what did the Mets see in that physical? Like, that's the big one. And there's going to be that sort of question there. If Because, I mean, again, Kumar Rocker's going to go pitch an independent ball. He's still, assuming there's no injury in that shoulder, he's still going to have that fastball. He's still going to have that wipeout slider. He's still going to have probably the questions about the changeup or about that third pitch. But the biggest question of them all is going to be what's going on in the MRI, what's going to be going on in that shoulder. And if he can prove that it's healthy and that weird fastball dip around, April, May was just a complete fluke, he'll get interest. He will absolutely get interest. And there's probably, again, assuming he's healthy, there would be some team that would give him a shot in the top 10. He had that sort of, he has that sort of stuff. He absolutely has top 10 stuff, especially, again, in a year when college pitching is a little weaker, I guess you could say, or definitely, I mean, the top ranked pitcher this year right now in Baseball America is Blade Tidwell out of Tennessee, who's 12th ranked. So could Kumar Rocker go up higher than him? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely think he could go as a top 10 guy if he was able to prove that he was healthy.
So if you're following Rocker throughout the spring, because obviously, as you said, we don't know what the Mets saw in those physicals that scared them off of the deal. Are you going to be looking at his velocity largely to figure out what is going on, or is there going to be more to it than that?
I mean, velocity is a great starting point. If the teams are doing their due diligence, which they absolutely will be, around draft time, or maybe even sooner if they want, they'll have Rocker in as soon as they possibly can to throw off the mound in front of the radars, in front of the StatCast, all that, and get all the information they can. Have them throw a bullpen in front of it and throw a dozen sliders and see if the slider still has the same metrics as in college. See if the fastball has the same, still has the same movement, the same velocity as that. And I mean, again, he could do a lot of good for himself if he was able to basically throw, here's the X-ray, here's the MRI. It is good. Look it over all you want. But he probably won't do that because he's not compelled to. And it's going to possibly bring some questions in for him. So again, velocity is a good place to look, but any team that's doing their due diligence will get him in front of the radars and the StatCast and just get all the info they can on him.
So this is the Orioles, and we probably have to talk a little bit of college outfielders at least, and that brings us to Chase DeLauter, who probably is the top college outfielder in this year's draft. You wrote about him in your recent piece on BSL. There's a lot to like here, though. You project him as a corner outfielder. Right now he's playing center field at JMU. Kind of give us your general thoughts on him and what the chances are that DeLauter maybe surprises us and sticks in center field, or do you definitely see him as a corner guy?
I mean, not definitely. It's so weird looking at him. I mean, again, he's a big guy. He's 6'4", 235 sort of thing. And he posts allegedly double plus. I haven't seen the video on it, but posts double plus times in the sprint. And so double plus times in the sprint can cover a lot of ground in center field, needless to say. So yeah, he could stick in center field. It's just, there are going to be, you look at the frame and there's going to be questions. He doesn't necessarily have a center fielder's frame, just like, Elijah Green. People project him to eventually wind out in a corner, even though he starts in center field, because, you figure, well, with Elijah Green, he's going to grow a bit more, add a few more pounds, all that. So there's just going to be questions from what they look at him. And I guess the other thing is, I have not had the opportunity to see Chase DeLauter play. I mean, I'm down the road from him, and I fully intend when he plays Virginia Tech. So I circled 3 key series for DeLauter. This weekend versus Florida State. He's got a 2-game midweek set against Tennessee in March, and then 2 games, one in Harrisonburg, one in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. And I fully intend on being at the Virginia Tech game because that's the only that's his only home game against Power 5 or major conference competition. Even if Virginia Tech isn't the most incredible of teams, it's still an ACC team. And so one of the things I want to see is, how does he read the ball off the bat? How is his movement out in there in center field? Because if he can stick in center field, all of a sudden that is a huge sort of thing, and honestly could rocket him above. If you truly believe he's a center fielder and if he continues to perform, honestly, that kind of can move him up above Jace Young or Brooks Lee. It's just the question of, because minute you move into the corner, you're going to lose some value there. And at the top of the draft, you got to be cognizant of that. But it's really interesting to see him performing at this level. And just wondering, because there's always the small conference guy, Nick Gonzalez a couple years ago, Colton Cowser last year. There's always going to be those small conference questions. But right now, you look at the video, he has a nice swing. He put up numbers in the CAA, and then he put up numbers on the Cape. And those numbers in the Cape were so important for him because, one, wood bat, and two, against the best competition he's going to have seen at that point. It allows teams to really believe in him at that point. So he has to go out and dominate the CAA again this year. But if it looks like he really can stick in center, he absolutely could be the top college guy off the board. And I personally find it harder to take him over Termarr Johnson or Drew Jones. But if the Orioles want to focus in on a college bat, he might be the one to look at.
Do it, Michael Elias. I'm glad I can, as a two-time graduate of JMU and someone who has a lot of very close connections to this baseball program, the coaching staff, and some of those players, I can't separate myself from that. So it's good to hear your thoughts on him. And if you come down for that Virginia Tech game, that's pushing it close to baby number 2 due date. But I'm definitely excited to watch Chase DeLauter, Gavin Cross go up against each other there. But my only question with DeLauter, though, is there's obviously the small school concern already. The Elon Northeastern matchups, Delaware matchups aren't super great, but I feel like I've watched DeLauter, and I live literally 2 minutes from the baseball stadium. And I feel like I've seen Chase DeLauter more in the Rockingham County Baseball League, summer baseball league up here, that some nights he's facing 17-year-old kids in high school. Some nights he's facing 33-year-old gym teachers. He raked, of course, but I feel like he's played more games in that league than he has in college, because 2020 COVID, 2021, just JMU's baseball season was a disaster because of COVID again. Does that add more concern for you, or is that Cape performance good enough to propel him up there?
It's going to add questions. I just pulled up in my database here. So let's see, his freshman year, 77 plate appearances. Last year, which technically also is listed as his freshman year, 127 plate appearances. So yes, there's a bit of question there and a bit of worry due to that. But honestly, so one of the things I do with my model, just to make sure to account for these small sample size sort of things, besides adjusting for opponents and adjusting for home park and all that sort of stuff, I still regress the statistics based on, regression to the mean, all that sort of thing, to try to account for that as much as possible. And his performance still stands up. He still has, adjusted ISOs at the top of the draft. He still has solid adjusted walks and doesn't strike out. He strikes out about what you'd expect for his performance and who he's playing and all of that sort of questions. So the performance, even though it's against small conference, is incredible enough that even the small sample size, there is some signal there. And then when you combine that with the fact that he did just go to the Cape and take care of business, which again, he absolutely had to do. Let's see, what did he put up in the Cape last year? Here it is, 298, 397, 589 slash line, 9 home runs, more walks than strikeouts, 21-18. If he had gone up there and batted 250 with a 150 ISO and 2 home runs, they might get him at the tail end of the top 100. Maybe. But he went out there and faced SEC arms, faced SEC, ACC, Big Ten arms, and put up numbers. And at that point, and put up numbers with a wood bat. At that point, you can really only argue so much. You can only claim that there is no signal in that small conference performance at that point.
Very cool. He pitches as well, Michael Elias, so.
Finding video on guys, especially college guys, for whatever reason, finding video on college guys is tough. I could not find video on YouTube for Jace Young. One of the few videos for Chase DeLauter out there is a JMU pitching performance, which was amusing to see.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. One more question up here about the draft. You're doing early research up there, but any sleepers you see could rise into consideration at 1-1 that we haven't talked about, or maybe even looking early second round? Or are there some very early names you could throw out and give Orioles fans?
Let's see. At 1-1, I think we're going to see who we see. We know the names. It would have to be an absolutely, Brock Jones is a nice player. But he would have to absolutely tear it up to jump up that much. Gavin Cross, nice player, but again, he would have to go just so much above and beyond where we expect to see him at this point for him to even get close to 1-1. So I think we pretty much covered the 1-1 real possibilities there. Let's see. Sleepers at like number, I'd say in the kind of second half. There are a few interesting guys that I kind of like in the in that sort of range. Let's see. Mostly, so it's difficult to put these names out there because I don't think they would actually go for them because they're pitchers. There are a lot of guys that I like pitchers wise. Like, I like Hunter Barco. I like, even with the Tommy John surgery, I like some of the stuff I was seeing out of Peyton Payette. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, out of Arkansas. And I mean, if that Tommy John surgery hadn't happened in March 2020, Connor Prelip, forget the discussions about Drew Jones and Termar Johnson. Connor Prelip probably would have been rolling at number one. Just the performance that Prelip was putting up in those first couple of years that he was there. The motion looked nice. Fastball touching in the mid, like around 97, generating 50% whiffs on his slider. And has a decent changeup, like again, 15 strikeouts per 9 and 2 walks per 9 sort of thing over a couple of years, and a career .96 ERA. Like at that point, there would have been he would have gone into the year at 1-1 basically projected. But Tommy John is a thing. That said, I still like him. I would still be willing to take that sort of risk because again, assuming the stuff's there, like we got to see something. And I mean, he got TJ in March of 2020. So there's a chance that he gets a little bit of work later in the college season, or maybe in some of the kind of like draft league, summer league sort of situations with the draft pushback. I like Jonathan Cannon last year out of Georgia. I still like him. Let's see. Mikey Romero. So as the year goes, Mike Elias likes high school shortstop types of guy. He likes getting those middle infielders. And Mikey Romero, kind of on the thin side, 5'11", 168. But he has a nice smooth stroke out of the left-handed side. And assuming that he's able to, grow into his body a bit more, add a little bit of power, nice defensive actions, good arm. He's the type of guy that could rise up into. Right now, he's 39 on Baseball America. I have him about number 30 on my model, but he's the type of guy that with a nice spring, a little added strength could move up boards, and could interest as a I don't want to say overslot, but a slightly overslot if they saved, like if they got a $300,000 discount, they could push an extra $300,000 to him and maybe get a really interesting player.
So before we transition out of high school, college baseball talk and into MLB draft lottery talk, we thought we would give a little bit of a viewing guide here for this weekend in college baseball, because we can actually talk about baseball games that are going to be played on schedule that aren't tied up by the lockout. So we each came up with a series that we'll be following. And I'll start with Nick because this is a series we've already talked about on this show.
Do I have to say it? I mean, I'm watching JMU, Florida State. I've got the popcorn ready. ACC Network. I got YouTube TV now, so I can watch ACC Network finally. Florida State, I think just before we came on the air, released their rotation. They're throwing 3 lefties, including Parker Messick and Bryce Hubbard, who I think Baseball America has both like top 50, I think overall, top 75 at least. So
56, 57.
Perfect. So Chase DeLauder, first shot, 3 lefties at Florida State, top 11, 12 program in the country, preseason ranking. So I'm excited to see what he can do. See if he can come out of the gate strong.
For me, I've just never watched a ton of college baseball, so I'm listening to you guys. All right, let's see. I don't even honestly know how to watch college baseball. I have ESPN Plus. I've got DirecTV Stream. I'm just going to flip channels and see if I can find it. Anything on there. If I have the ACC Network, I'll definitely check out Chase DeLauder. But bare minimum, I'm going to be on Twitter and hopefully watching some highlights and clips here and there just from following guys on there. And yeah, I can't wait. I got to do it. If I'm going to watch college baseball, this is the year. There's nothing else to watch.
I'm going to be checking out Stanford and Cal State Fullerton this weekend. in part because I have this weird thing that when in doubt, I just turn on a West Coast game. I don't know why I do that in the Major League season. But I am interested in Brock Jones. I agree with Steven that it's going to take a lot for him to rise to that 1-1 spot. But at the same time, this feels like a player who, for various reasons, because he did play a little bit of football in college, you did have 2 years affected by the pandemic. Seems like he's got an interesting raw skill set, could put together a nice year. So I want to see what he does, start learning a little bit more about him as we get started the college season.
Shall I give one? Because I have a couple things here on this one.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Let's hear it.
Sure. I say, Nick, incidentally, I will be watching Chase DeLauder because, Parker Messick, Bryce Hubbard, incidentally, also really like Hubbard. Type of thing, performance over raw stuff, but, low 90s fastball and swing and miss changeup and curveball and 13 strikeouts per 9. I'll take that. And even better for DeLauder, they both were in the Cape League, so I assume assuming they weren't on the same team. It doesn't say where they were playing. He at least has some familiarity there. But besides that obvious one, I'm looking at the State Farm College Baseball Showdown down in Texas, which, one of those preseason tournament sort of thing. Well, not exactly a tournament, but a preseason showcase where you got Oklahoma, you got Auburn, number 13 Arizona, Kansas State, Michigan, and Jace Young and number 23 Texas Tech. So that's some pretty solid competition. It's there's honestly no weak link there. Like a lot of times in these preseason showcases, you have a couple of power teams, maybe one upper level mid-major, and then one pretty rough team there. No, that's all power conference, all pretty solid stuff, and a lot of names to kind of look on there. Other one to keep an eye on. I think this might be the only matchup of ranked teams for a full series this weekend. Oklahoma State and Vanderbilt. Not a huge year for Vanderbilt in terms of like top, they don't have anyone in the top 10 of the draft, but they still have a couple of other interesting guys. They always do. Carter Young as their shortstop, maybe a late first round type of guy, depending on his performance this year.
So that's some stuff to check out over the weekend as we wait for more baseball this spring. And speaking of the potential delays, we'll now turn to how the draft has gotten mixed up in the collective bargaining agreement negotiations, which is the prospect of a draft lottery. Based on comments from Rob Manfred last week, it seems like we are going to have a draft lottery as part of the next CBA, but we still really don't know a lot of the details. We do know the Players Union was seeking to have a lottery that would involve the top 8 picks. The owners had it at the top 3, so maybe we split the difference, but we'll see. So, Stephen, I just wanted to start with this because you have worked on the inside of a draft with the Rays. Do you think that a draft lottery would be in any way effective at getting rid of the problem or the perceived problem, depending on how you look at it, of tanking, or is it just something that's not going to really solve anything on its own?
On its own, absolutely, it does not solve anything. There are too many other issues kind of tied up in there with the questions of, revenue sharing comes into all of that. The competitive balance tax comes into that. Free agent draft pick compensation comes into that. Changing the top of the draft alone, even if you say teams can't pick in the top 5 or the top 3 for more than a couple years in a row, even if you have a lottery sort of system, does it help? Probably, because all the models, all the things show that there's a huge drop off after the top couple of picks in terms of expected results for players. Even when you account for, your Mike Trout's getting picked at 25 and the like. After those first couple of picks, it's a pretty steep slope. So yeah, it can affect things, and it's going to have a cascading effect of how, I would assume only the top 8 picks are affected. Beyond that, in the second round, it would revert back to record order, I would assume. But then at that point, if you're the worst team in baseball and you wind out with the number 6 pick in the first round, your bonus pool is affected. And so that gives you a little less flexibility to kind of work with the oversliding, undersliding that you might have had at having number 1 and number 31, say. You lose a little bit of ability there. So yes, I say it's going to help things. It's going to help decrease the, the tanking sort of concerns, hopefully increase some of the competitive balance side of things, but it's not a fix all on its own. So much else has to go into it. Probably more has to go on the revenue sharing side than I think people realize. But actually, I wouldn't say that. There's been a lot of good coverage on that revenue sharing side of things and how that really affects things. So people might be better educated than I might be giving them credit for. But if they think, let's say, if listeners or readers think that the draft lottery will fix it, you're dreaming. You're completely dreaming.
Yeah, I feel like, can there be a way where teams are forced to take the money they get from the revenue sharing and put it back into the team, to the product on the field? I don't know how that's, exactly possible, but
ideally that's what it was supposed to be. But yeah.
And maybe if you expand the playoffs to 12, let's not do 14. But if you expand it to 12, maybe, that gives teams more of a willingness to try to get in, and then anything can happen at that point. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be just the lottery alone that's going to fix it, but it can't hurt.
No, not. I say it would help. Like it really would. Just maybe not a ton.
I got no thoughts. I don't know. I was interested to hear what Steven had to say there because I think about it. I think I mentioned last week somebody asked us that, and I just think that, okay, so I can't get a top 8 pick. Like if you're going to tank, I just feel like teams are still going to do that. There are going to be other ways around this. Teams are going to find new loopholes to figure out ways. It may not be as extreme as what we've seen Baltimore do over the last couple of years, but teams are still going to exploit any rule they can, obviously. But I'm interested to see what happens. I think the biggest question a lot of Orioles fans have, I know a lot of people ask us, they say, is it going to affect this year's draft? Is there any potential for that, or is that safe as we know?
I would tend to expect it's safe, but you can't say that conclusively. Just it would feel kind of odd because I'm sure teams would have acted differently last August, September, depending on what agreement maybe would have been developed. Because one of the other things, there are many different ways to do a draft lottery. Do you, if you have let's say a 5-team lottery, do you have a flat 20% chance to get the number 1 pick and you go from there? Or does the worst team get a bit of a little bit of a advantage? I've always loved the gold system, which I don't know if y'all familiar with the gold system of assigning draft order.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, you might know it under another name, but the idea is that the minute the team is eliminated, they start accruing wins, and the team with the most wins from when they're eliminated gets the number 1 pick, so that the absolutely god-awful teams still get the most number of opportunities to accrue wins. But it incentivizes a bit of winning. Now, I'm pretty sure there's no way it would ever happen, but I still like it. I still like it, at least conceptually, as an idea.
Yeah, I do like that idea.
That's interesting. I'll take it.
Best case scenario, doesn't affect this year. Orioles get 1-1 or keep 1-1 as we expect. Then they expand it to a lottery of 8. We get 70-ish wins in 2022, 8th worst record in baseball. Oh, what do you know? Orioles get 1-1 again in 2023.
I say with how the national media has covered the Orioles' strategic decisions in the last few years, there might be just an absolute outcry if that happens.
I can only imagine the tweet storms coming from certain national writers if that does happen.
Buster Olney, where you at?
I'll bring up this, Stephen, which is just conceptually, do you prefer, you just mentioned the golden rule is kind of your preferred system, but if you had to take, say, an 8-team lottery over the current draft system, which would you choose?
Choosing between the current system and the 8-team? I would take the current system, but in a way, so I would take the current system, mess with the allocation of pools a little bit, try to affect that a little bit, maybe essentially still reward, the opportunity to select the first player, but maybe even out the curve a little bit of the pools, because ultimately, teams want to draft players that they will sign. And if they know that they can't necessarily sign a player for reasons of if they select them, this player is not going to sign and the player has a better deal kind of hanging out 2 picks later, then, and that would be absolutely something that would be affected by the bonus pools and the curve of that, just basically as a middle ground between the two of less incentivizing the the number one pick is an incredibly powerful thing, but the money that comes with it, the bonus pools that come with having the number one pick, frankly, are more important. So if you can even that out a little bit, I think that would still allow you to have, the worst team has the shot at the best talent, but not as overwhelming of a shot as they currently do. Now, that said, I would also be fine if, under the blow it up perspective, there's a part of me that just wants to say, all draftees are free agents. Here's your bonus pool. The worst team does still get the largest bonus pool, and you get to sign how you want. Basically turn it into a free market. To a certain extent, there's a part of me that would love to just see that blow it up and honestly get some of those. Hopefully, it probably wouldn't wind out like this just because, again, the talent curve being how it is. But hopefully, get as many players paid as possible in that regard.
That would definitely be the most fair and interesting experiment for sure. But how would you feel about like a hard slot system like Ben Badler had talked about if they institute an international draft, or when, I guess I should say, because they don't want, teams taking advantage of these kids like they definitely would. If you sign the first pick, you get this much. If you sign second, you get this much. And that's just what you get. Or I think I saw something about there was negotiating maybe like you can't offer less than 75% of slot, something like that. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Yes. Just now, there might need to be some concessions on the players' side, just because a lot of times that teams don't offer that is when they suddenly, the Kumar Rocker situation, they suddenly look at the MRI and they see something that they don't like. But to a certain extent, they should do their homework prior to the draft as well. So I absolutely think that, players should, as a general rule, I am for the players getting paid. They are the product. So that said, I wouldn't mind some protection for players that get drafted there. I don't think I'd be in favor of the hard slotting system. Maybe it's a hard slot plus minus, some small percentage that is a set amount, slot plus or minus, let's see. Number one slot is what, 7 million, 8 million, around that range. So maybe slot plus minus 10%, give or take, something like that, to provide a little bit of wiggle room in that sort of way for teams to allow for the, I do enjoy, conceptually, let's say, there are times when I don't like it, but I enjoy conceptually the idea of trying to build together the best draft class based on, again, the thought process of underslotting, overslotting, all that sort of thing. But I think some guardrails wouldn't be the worst idea.
What about, why can't we trade draft picks? Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh boy. Are you prepared? Are you all prepared for the outcry when Mike Elias trades the number one pick for number 3 plus a second rounder and a 2023 second rounder as well? Are y'all ready to have that discussion with everyone on the boards here?
I love chaos, and the negativity is abound anyway. Why not? Let's do it.
I'm ready for those
Fair enough.
NBA
Honestly,
trades.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't mind it either. But that said, I don't want. All I do is I just run the model. I don't worry about everything from besides that. I leave that you all to deal with that side of it.
Give me 7 future first-round draft picks for this year's first-round draft pick, like they do in the NBA. Let's go.
Adley Rutschman for yeah.
That said, we might have gotten a better deal for Manny Machado if they had allowed something like that.
That's fair.
That is especially fair to bring up when we had a discussion back in December about whether or not they would have been better off letting Manny Machado walk after the 2018 season for the draft picks, wherever they would have fallen compared to what they got.
Well, I mean, that might be going now. Apparently, they're talking, and I think they've agreed both sides to eliminate draft compensation, or at least draft penalties. I'm not sure if the compensation side is gone, but the penalties side seems to be going out in some of the most recent reports that that both sides agree on. I mean, the players obviously want the penalties gone, but I think I saw somewhere that Manfred did agree that the penalty side will be gone. I hope they keep the compensation side. I hope the team at least nets, a second rounder for a free agent that walks that they make a qualifying offer to or something like that.
Baby steps. By July, we might have a deal.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, it does feel like it's a long way off. It does seem like, though, it's a draft. There are some consensuses. We're going to have a lottery. It looks like a 20-round draft is the way of the future here with MLB, perhaps. But we'll see. Steven, I see you're not sure there.
No. Not that I'm not sure. I just don't like it. I mean, just with the latest reports about MLB, trying to negotiate down from 180 minor leaguers to 150, which basically means another rung of the development ladder cut, which at some point would probably mean a 15-round draft. I don't want to see that. I really would. I personally loved digging through the 40th round or the 30th, 35th round guys and digging through that. But I'm a bit obsessive and a bit of a nut in that regard. But I don't want to see a 15-round draft. There's so much error bars. Teams are good at their jobs as a general rule, and they can identify talent. But there's always players that slip through, and the error bars on evaluations, both strictly model evaluations as well as scouting evaluations, the error bars are such that cutting it down to only 150 players in the minors and I would think, in all honesty, inevitable at that point, 15-round draft, even if it's the next CBA, it feels like there would be a surprising amount of talent lost, more talent than I think people would expect by losing just rounds 16 through 20.
Yeah, it's a whole nother ball of yarn that we could probably really spend a lot of time on. But yeah, baseball is great because there are so many great stories of guys who just worked and developed, after not being, Mike Piazza, 50th round draft pick, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'd hate to see that part go away.
But if they cut them, they're going to pay the minor leaguers more, guys. That's what we were told.
Instead of $11,000 a year, it would be $13,000 a year.
Yeah, the extra 20%. Yeah, maybe that's the idea. They take the revenue sharing money that they get and pay the minor leaguers, because usually the revenue sharing money is going to go to the teams that have more of those minor leaguers in that kind of development prospect pipeline.
Yeah, trickle down a little bit. Come on.
Keep this conversation going another hour. We'll solve the entire CBA.
That's right.
There we go.
Yeah. Well,
so we'll just solve the whole season starting on time. I do it.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, someone suggested we talk for 5,000 hours straight today. So if I'll talk for 5,000 hours straight if we get the deal done by opening day.
I got to teach on Friday, so I don't think I can do that.
I was going to pre-record 3,500 hours in half an hour. So.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yeah. So just to wrap up here, Steven, you've got a long ways to go as a draft. We really enjoy your coverage, your work over as a site and on the warehouse. But what are you going to be looking for in the next few months, and how is your model going to sort of evolve?
So much of the model is really geared towards college performance, because high schoolers, I just don't have access to the type of information that teams have to really work off of high schoolers. And I'm watching, I'm going to watch the evaluations of the high schoolers that come in. I'm going to watch as much video on the high schoolers as coming in, because again, my draft model is just a tool in my decision-making process. I maintain a pref list that is, yes, heavily influenced by the draft model, but it isn't the be-all, end-all. Draft model right now has Brooks Lee, I think, in the 20s. I wouldn't put him that low, but I do note its concerns, and I don't have Brooks Lee number 3 overall. I have him somewhere in the back half of the top 10 because of that, because of the concerns that are there. So I'll be watching the high schoolers, seeing if Drew Jones looks like he's added a little weight and is doing a better job connecting his swing altogether. I will say Termar Johnson, I'm just making sure that, nothing goes awry. I'm going to watch Elijah Green for the swing and miss. But I'm watching those college statistics very closely. I'm looking for improvement in Brooks Lee's walk rate. I'm looking for hopefully a little bit more power out of Jace Young. I'm looking for Chase Slaughter to absolutely tear it up. I would love to see a Connor Norby season where he hits 400 with 20 home runs, basically. That's the type of performance that could get him into the and sticking in center field, into the 1-1 conversation. So I'm watching. There are a few guys that I'm watching specific stats for them real closely, and I'm watching all the video I can. And just continually updating. Just don't wait for, don't settle into an opinion too soon. Just take all the data as I can and just continually update until, I don't think we actually have a date for the draft officially yet. We'll say until July 13th. Keep on updating until then.
And make sure we have coverage for all 3 days.
Yes.
Yeah, we do not want to get in trouble for that again. So, Bob, Nick, before we wrap up, any final thoughts?
No, this was educational for me. I enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah, it's great to talk about actual real baseball games, and we get to go off in 48 hours, less than 48 hours from now, and actually watch these guys that we talked about today live. So definitely go out. If you're close to college baseball game, go out and watch, support those kids. I mean, watch it on TV. There's so many games on over this weekend, and yeah, just enjoy baseball. It's finally here.
Yep, exactly. And on that note, thank you for listening to tonight's episode of On the Verge. Thank you to Stephen Loftus for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with Nathan Ruiz of the Baltimore Sun. We'll be back on our normal night of Monday. In the meantime, check out BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com for all the latest coverage there. Be sure to also visit the message board, join in discussion with fellow readers of the site, as well as some writers there. And follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.
Is your wallet lighter than usual after a fun-filled summer? A little cash can go a long way, which is why the Chime checking account has tons of benefits you'll love, like fee-free overdraft up to $200 for eligible members, no monthly fees, and thousands of ATMs. You can even get paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Sign up for Chime today. Get started at chime.com/fee-free.
Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Access to direct deposits up to 2 days early depends on the timing of the submission of the payment file from the payer.